Hey everybody, it's Ian. How's it going? I would like to talk today about my evolving thoughts on the analog versus digital thing, um, and how that's changed quite a bit, honestly, since I started doing this channel. Um, I started this channel a couple years ago, whenever it was, and kind of went back and forth about what the name should be. Ended up, of course, calling it Broke with Audiophile Taste. Was reluctant to do so because I really didn't want to associate myself with the word audiophile, even though, um, like, I think a lot about sound quality and I think it's important. Um, and I talk about that a lot. But at the same time, I find a lot of audiophileness to be super obnoxious, and didn't really want to associate myself with it. Um, but really, it was just a play on words. I don't think I've ever said where it's from, but it's no one seems to have caught on to this. That it's from an Azealia Banks album from like a decade ago. She had a record called "Broke with Expensive Taste," and so I changed it to "Broke with Audiophile Taste," and I don't think anyone's ever figured that one out. But that's what. So I sort of went into this with that sort of reluctance, but I just liked the name enough that I just went with it. Um, and In a very early video, I think is this intro video I did, I talked about how it's all about the analog for me. Like, that's what I love about records, is that it's the only sort of serious medium where you can have an all analog presentation of music. Um, and like, I don't personally think of cassettes as being all that serious of a medium, even though they can theoretically be all analog, and reel to reel has just never taken off. So it's just too expensive. Um, and so that's what I've always liked about records, and that's because like that's when I first got into records really as a grown up in the mid '90s. Um, that was what jumped out at me, was the sound quality that's possible with them. That albums that I had gotten to know on '80s and '90s CDs, I heard them on vinyl for the first time and was blown away with how realistic they sounded. Especially at the time, uh, like, well, what's the difference between these two? Well, one's digital and one's analog, so I guess it must be about analog, and that's why they sound so much different, and that you can't get this hyper realistic sound with digital sourcing. So better to have the analog sourcing. Like, I think that's conclusion a lot of people perhaps even came to. That's just the obvious difference between the two. That must be the explanation. And Even up until the time that I started this channel, I thought that way. And at a certain point, cracks started to form in the foundation of that. So let me give you an example of an early one that. All right, so this is Scattered by Voices' first album. This is a reissue on Scat Records. And it's a recent reissue from a couple years ago, but it's the mastering. This is a repress really of the coppers that were cut in the early '90s, and like I think maybe '94 is when the original box set of all the early Guided by Voices albums came out. And so this is a DMM cut, and I talked to Robert Griffin, the Scat Records guy, and he said that he sent them tapes, and so that they cut this from tape. But I also talked to Don Grossinger, the guy who cut this at Europa Disc. Although I didn't ask him in such a super specific way, what I got out of our conversation was that is that there is a digital element to their mastering chain, and that they're basically the lathe is taking the analog signal and converting it to digital, and then there's a computer that tells the lathe then about groove spacing and all that, and that so that at the last possible moment, this is converted to digital before it's cut. And so my understanding then is that this is not an all analog presentation, but this is a lo-fi recording. But I think it sounds fucking awesome. I think it sounds really realistic, and like a lot of those adjectives that have become cliches that we use to try to describe this ineffable thing about the quality of the music that we like. Um, like they all apply to this, and I generally like DMM cuts, and I think that they are generally um, digital. I think that basically, if I see something's DMM, I assume that signal has been transferred to digital at the last possible moment, if not sooner, but at least then. Um, and so, what does that all mean, right? Like, if the thing that 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 causes something to have that sound quality that I look for, if the thing is analog, then what does that mean if this is digital, but it has those qualities that I like? What does it all mean? Here's another one that started to kind of open my eyes to this. Why Arabella is a Cup. This is a 1988 album, and this really surprised me how good it sounded. I don't know the details of the recording or the mastering or the presentation in general. Um, to my ears, it's very alive sounding. It has a little bit of this sort of cold distance that I tend to associate with digital. So my guess is that there's at least some digital element to this. Um, but it also sounds very three-dimensional, very realistic. I like how this sounds. Um, and so, what does that all mean? If I previously believed that the only important difference is analog versus digital, if this is digital and I love how it sounds, what does it all mean? Here's another kind of eye opener for me. XTC's English settlement. In my old collection in the mid 90s to mid aughts, I had the US original of this. At the time, I probably didn't even know this was a double album. I had the single album US original. And at the time, I thought this is the best sounding album I've ever heard. I looked at that as sort of the golden age of analog recording. At the time, I wasn't really aware of like the tube recordings of like Rudy Van Gelder and that, and how good those can sound. But certainly, like of the transistor era, all analog era, I looked at this as sort of like a crowning achievement, and then soon thereafter, digital got involved. That's how I thought of it at the time. But again, this hyper realistic, super like in the room, I could keep listing all these cliches, and it's not going to mean much if you haven't heard it. But it just had everything I was looking for sound wise. Sold that collection a long time ago, like I seem to say every video, and then I got this newer reissue that. A little bit weird wording, but I take it probably to be all analog. They say, cut from the original stereo master, approved by Andy Partridge. Weird way to say it, but approved by Andy Partridge, they say on all their reissues. On other reissues, they say basically cut from masters approved by Andy Partridge. Here they say cut from the original stereo master approved by... Anyway, so assuming this is all analog, this, while not sounding bad, didn't quite have that sort of visceral thing that I remembered from back in the day. And I kind of chalked it up to, well, is it just that I don't remember? I don't know. Why does it not quite do it for me? And so I ultimately found a UK original. Or this is like the second pressing of the original mastering. The original pressing, I think, didn't have this sticker, but for all intents and purposes, an original because it's the original mastering, the original cut. This does have those sounds that I was looking for. This does have that visceral, that je ne sais quoi that was somehow missing from this more recent all analog reissue. And so that's another thing where it's just like, it's got to be more than just analog versus digital, because here are two seemingly all analog versions of this, and one of them sounds significantly better than the other. The other one is this very sort of tame and moderated and polite, and this is just in your face. I'm just like, yeah. When albums sound like that, yeah, like that. So again, it just, in this sort of kind of newer questioning everything mindset, what does it all mean? What is the difference between these two things? Is it the equipment and the mastering chain that's different? Is it the expertise of the mastering engineer? The oh, it's a recycling truck. Is it just the EQ decisions? Is it the freshness of the tape? I'm super skeptical of that idea, but I don't know. What are these differences? What is this thing? Why were they able to make this like stunningly realistic, wonderful sounding version in 1982, and then in 2020-ish, 2019, they've got on the back of this an acceptable sounding, even in a vacuum, good sounding, but compared to the original, disappointing and relatively lifeless sounding version. Why? Why are they different? What is that difference? What's the thing that's making the difference? This could even possibly, as I understand it, mastering chains that had a digital step sort of built into it, those were being sold as early as 1979, from what I understand. So by 1982, it's possible that this was even digital. Possible. I don't know. But it's in the world of possibilities. And yet, sounds better than the 2019 version. Why? What's the difference? And then this one was a really big head scratcher for me. This is the European original on Vertigo, but it's the American mastering. So it's a master disc DMM cut. And they just sent some DMM coppers over to Europe, and they made stampers over there. But the original American cut of this, and this is mostly digitally recorded. As I understand it, they did this in the Black Album the same way, which is analog recording of the drums and then everything else digital. So the way that must have worked is analog recording of the drums, and then they dump that to digital tape, and then continue their recording with the digital tape of guitar, bass, vocals, etc. And then they mix the digital. It's listed on the CD as A/DDD, if I remember correctly. And so this is just digital through and through, really. Despite the drums only being recorded analog. Those ultimately must have been dumped to digital. And this sounds so much better and realistic and checking all those boxes, all those things I'm looking for, than the more recent Chris Bellman cut. And Chris Bellman, I believe, did not remaster that. I believe somebody else mastered it, essentially EQing a digital file, and then sent that to Chris Bellman for him to cut flat. So really, it's just about Chris Bellman's mastering chain is why his name would be attached to that, but otherwise it was someone else making EQing decisions, I believe, as I understand that. But why is there such a huge difference? This is digital. But why did the 1988 digital original DMM cut, why is that so much more realistic sounding? Why is it so much more visceral? So much more alive, so much more like the authentic real thing? You can hear the bass, by the way, on the title track on this original cut, and as opposed to later versions. Anyway, so again, what does this all mean? My original hypothesis was it's just about analog versus digital. Well, this is digital versus digital, and the old digital sounds better than the new digital. Why? New digital should be higher res. Why? I don't get it. I feel like I understand this whole thing so much less than I used to, or at least I guess I used to sort of delude myself into thinking that I understood this, and now I'm realizing that I don't understand it. And why? Here's one that also surprised me. I'll try to just describe this quickly. I had the original CD of Napalm Death's Utopia Banished, and then I got a more recent reissue that is not one of their FDR series. Earache Records has this full dynamic range series that sounds really good. They generally sound better than I remember the original CDs sounding, but they did not reissue this in that quality. I don't know why. My guess is because they don't have original source material. But in any case, curiosity got the cat here, and I finally got an actual original of this from 1992, I believe. And this is a muddy sounding album always, and this version is also muddy sounding. I think it was just still early on trying to figure out how to record such extreme music. Um, but but it just has that extra je ne sais quoi. It's got that. It's the tom toms are just more like boop, 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 they jump out of the speakers more. It just sounds more real, and it's just much more of a visceral experience of hearing this. It's just got that extra 1%, whatever it is. I don't know how to describe it, but it's just got that certain something that makes it sound like the real deal, and it just has it's how I want it to sound. And why are they not able to replicate that years later? Why are they not able to better it years later? Much less replicated. One final one here. Sepultura's Territory. This is a 12-inch. It was a single from their KSAD album. I never really liked that album that much. I loved Beneath the Remains and Arise, and I thought KSAD was kind of inconsistent, but I did love the singles, and I got this, and it's from 1993. It's got to be digital, even though there's no information about the sourcing here. It's got to be digital, but it's on 45, and it's they seem to have made different mastering decisions for 12-inch singles. Just super alive, visceral, realistic, whatever. I hate using all these cliches, but I don't know what else to say. So anyway, what's my ultimate message here? My ultimate message here is that while there's still a part of me that just sort of logically thinks that, like, if you got an analog tape, you should cut directly from it. I used to think that was the whole story, and it's not. It's not the whole story. Is it about EQing decisions? Is it about equipment that's used? Is it something else? Is it I feel like I understand this less than I ever used to understand it, and that I'm much more relaxed about the analog versus digital thing. It's something else somehow. It's mainly something else somehow. What that something else is more of a mystery than it ever has been. So I just thought I'd share this. Like, I've learned so much in the last couple of years that now I know that I know nothing. It's really what is the journey I'm trying to share with you on this. I wonder if that was useful to anybody. I kind of doubt it, but this stuff's been on my mind, and I've been trying to figure out a way to synthesize it and encapsulate it and present it, and this is what I've come up with. So curious if anybody else has thoughts about this. All right, thanks a lot. So long.